Listening Section Practice Test. Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
So today we're going to continue our discussion of various mental disorders. Specifically, I'm going to focus on various anxiety disorders. Now, of course, everyone feels anxious or uneasy now and again. You may feel anxious on your first day of a new job, or when you have to meet someone important, for example. Some people feel anxious when they visit the dentist. Some typical symptoms include a pounding heart, sweaty palms, or a dry mouth. But now, suppose that the anxiety is serious enough to keep you from enjoying life. Maybe it interferes with your work or controls much of your daily routine. Or maybe you experience occasional instances of anxiety that are terrifying enough that you become immobilized with fear. Maybe you will take extreme measures to get away from the object or situation causing the fear. Now, these anxieties can be put into three main groups according to what causes the reaction. The first are what we call specific phobias. These are the most common phobias, and their focus is specific objects. In fact, the thing feared is often relatively safe, and also the sufferer usually realizes that and knows that their fear is irrational. A very common specific phobia is fear of heights, for example. This fear is very common. No doubt some of you have felt this fear from time to time. Fear of spiders and insects is another common one. Spiders are not usually harmful. Well, not usually anyway. But some people break out into a cold sweat and have heart palpitations and become immobile even if they know a spider is on the other side of the room. Some of the less common phobias seem rather bizarre. For example, would you believe some people are afraid of color, say the color yellow? Another strange one is fear of laughter. I guess that's not a laughing matter for the sufferer. Okay, so what causes these specific phobias? Well, we don't know exactly. We do know that they tend to run in families, and they are apparently slightly more common in women. Many of them persist. That is, they don't go away on their own. At least that tends to be the case with phobias that develop in adolescence or adulthood. Specific phobias that develop in childhood are more likely to disappear with time. Another category of phobia is called social phobia. This fear is really the fear of being embarrassed or humiliated in front of other people. If social phobia is serious enough, it can prevent a person from continuing in school or work, and maybe that person avoids making friends. Now, some social phobics can actually be at ease with other people most of the time, except in particular situations. So, for example, a sufferer here may believe that small mistakes they make are more significant than they really are, or feel that everyone is looking at them. They could also be extremely fearful of, for example, using the phone in front of other people. Or it may be something really simple and seemingly irrational, such as drinking a cup of coffee, or even, say, buttoning a coat in front of others. A third category of phobia is known as agoraphobia. Do I need to put that on the board? No? Okay, fine. Okay, so this phobia causes people to suffer anxiety about being in places or situations from which they perceive it might be difficult to escape, or in which it seems help is not available. So, agoraphobia might include a fear of traveling alone, being alone in a crowd, or being unable to leave a place easily. People with this condition often develop the disorder after suffering from a panic attack. That is, a feeling of intense terror with symptoms such as sweating and shortness of breath. Such panic attacks may occur randomly and without warning, so this makes it difficult for a sufferer to predict what kind of situation will provoke a panic attack. So then he or she will try to avoid situations and places where such attacks have happened previously. Okay, to wrap up today, Well, the good news is that all of these disorders can be treated with some degree of success through various medications and therapies. Tomorrow, we'll look in more detail at the kind of treatments that might prove useful in dealing with some of them.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 1. What is the lecture mainly about? 2. Why does the professor say that many people feel anxious when they visit a dentist? 3. What does the professor say about specific phobias? 4. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Some of the less common phobias seem rather bizarre. For example, would you believe some people are afraid of color? Say, the color yellow? Another strange one is fear of laughter. I guess that's not a laughing matter for the sufferer.
Why does the professor say this?
I guess that's not a laughing matter for the sufferer.
Five. Social phobia might include which of the following fears? 6. What does the professor imply when she says this?
Do I need to put that on the board?
7. What does the professor imply about treatment of phobias? 'Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hello, Dr. Grant. Do you have a minute?
As a matter of fact, I do. So, what do you need, Ron?
Well, you wrote on my questionnaire, come and see me.
Ah, yes. Ron, there are a few problems with the way you set your questionnaire up. I'm sorry to say that I don't think you've thought out the statements very well. It was a prime example of why so many people complain about filling out questionnaires. You might even alienate your subjects with a questionnaire like this.
Oh, I don't want... What did I do?
Don't look so discouraged. Several of your classmates have had similar problems. Okay, so what did you do? Well, for one thing, people get really annoyed with "and" statements.
And statements? What do you mean by and statements?
Well, let's say you get a questionnaire statement like, "I like fruit and vegetables," with the choices of yes or no. Well, if you don't like fruit and vegetables, you check the no box, and if you do, the yes box, no problem. But what do you check if you like fruit but not vegetables?
Oh, I see.
You've several "and" statements in your questionnaire which need to be taken care of.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, there was actually. Can I see your questionnaire to jog my memory?
Sure. Here it is.
Thanks. This statement. Males are better critical thinkers than females. I can tell you now what answers you'll get for that item. Most, if not all, males will mark yes, and females will mark no. It's kind of silly to have a statement that you already know how your subjects will answer. And it won't be of much use for collecting data, will it?
No, I guess it won't.
Furthermore, women who get this will be really annoyed with the implication that men think more effectively than they do. And once you've angered your subjects, they won't be very cooperative in answering the rest of the questionnaire. They might sabotage your results by not being truthful. Or they'll become critical thinkers and write their criticism all over your questionnaire. But chances are they'll just dump the questionnaire in the trash.
Yeah, I can see that. But, how can I phrase it?
Well, I'm not really sure what you're trying to find out here. Perhaps you want to know if people consider critical thinking to be more prevalent in a particular gender, in which case you could write, the ability to think critically is gender-based. Is that the information you wanted?
Yeah, that's it. Anything else?
Oh, look at this statement. I'm unable to think critically. That's like saying I'm stupid. How many people would answer yes to that? See? What I'd like you to do is go through every statement on your questionnaire very critically. Think, what information do I want? How can I phrase my statement to get meaningful results? Maybe you and a classmate could discuss each other's questionnaires.
That's a good idea.
Ron, I'd like to look it over once more before you pass it out, okay?
Okay, Dr. Grant. Thank you for your help.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 8. Why does the student go to see his professor? 9. Why does the professor talk about fruit and vegetables? 10. According to the professor, what should the student avoid in writing his questionnaire? 11. Listen again to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, there was actually. Can I see your questionnaire to jog my memory?
Why does the professor say this?
Can I see your questionnaire to jog my memory?
"12. What can be inferred about the questionnaire? 'Listen to part of a discussion in a geology class.
So, we've talked about the ecology of grasslands, areas of the world where rainfall is not enough to sustain thick forests, but enough to prevent desertification. That is, the spread of desert lands. I want to turn now to a discussion of a different kind of biome, or natural community, known as the tundra. Okay, so as you know, the tundra is a region of the Arctic, lacking in trees, bushes, and covered for the most part in short vegetation, well adapted to the inhospitable conditions. In fact, the word tundra comes from a Finnish word meaning treeless plain. I guess you could say that's a pretty accurate description of what you find there: flat land and no trees. Today, I'm going to ignore the region known as the alpine tundra, which is found at higher elevations in mountainous regions all over the world. This has similar characteristics to the Arctic tundra, but also enough differences that I think we can justify spending a separate lesson on its main features. So, to understand the life systems that exist in the tundra, you have to understand that below the surface is a permanently frozen layer of soil. This is the layer called the permafrost. Perma from permanent, in other words, permanent frost. Anything that grows there has to be able to adapt first to this impenetrable floor of frozen soil. What do you think could be one adaptation to this situation?
Well,
plants would have to have shallow, I mean short, root systems because the roots wouldn't be able to penetrate the hard layer.
Okay, that's right. So what about any rain that falls, or water from melted snow in the summer? Where does that go?
Well, I guess it can't go anywhere. The ground is too hard to soak it up and too flat for it to drain off.
Right. So what you get is a kind of shallow, waterlogged top layer of soil, which freezes and thaws as the seasons change from winter to summer. So, on the surface, marshes form, and in low-lying areas and depressions, small lakes and ponds are common during the periods when the ice and snow melt. This poorly drained water on the surface provides moisture for plants. In fact, there is relatively little annual rain, so this marshy, wet ground is important for plant growth. So what about the soil itself? What would you guess is the nutrient value for living things?
Well, since it's very cold most of the year, wouldn't that mean that dead organisms break down slowly? So, wouldn't that mean a low level of nutrients for plants to use?
That's absolutely correct. Just as with the moorland biomes that we were discussing last week, mineral nutrients are in short supply because cold, waterlogged soil slows down the rate of decay of dead plants and other organisms. So the plants that do exist have to adapt to this special environment, a poor, shallow soil and a bitterly cold climate with strong winds. You mentioned the short root systems, but what other kind of plant characteristics do you think might be useful in a region like this?
Well, given the strong winds that blow, wouldn't it be useful to be short? After all, tall plants with shallow roots would be easily blown over.
True. And to add to that, of course, the short roots can only maintain short plants. So that's another reason why the plants are very short. Another adaptation is that the plants cluster together in groups, often taking advantage of depressions in the ground to avoid the strong winds, and that helps them to resist the cold temperatures. Then, also, the snow itself helps them survive in these conditions, since the snow effectively insulates against the bitter cold. When the snow melts in the spring, of course, the plants have a ready supply of moisture, making up for the low levels of precipitation in the region. So, when the summer finally comes, what you get is a time of compensation, you could say. As you know, the summer sun never sets at these high latitudes, so the plants get sunlight for 24 hours a day. It's as though they work overtime to produce essential sugars and the other substances necessary for plant functioning from this continuous light energy. It's like the sudden arrival of summer, as if the vegetation as well as the insect and animal life were hurrying to take advantage of the relatively short time before the onset of the next winter.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 13. What is the discussion mainly about? 14. Why does the professor not want to discuss alpine tundra? 15. According to the professor, what features are typical of tundra regions? 16. According to the professor, why do tundra plants often cluster together in depressions? 17. In the discussion, various facts about plants in the tundra are mentioned. Indicate whether each of the following describes tundra vegetation. The program continues on the next CD. Listen to part of a lecture in a cultural studies class.
Okay, let's get started. Now, today I want to continue discussing changes in artistic movements in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Okay, so now we've seen that in all the arts around that time, there was a strong movement away from what was seen as the restrictions of conventional ideas. Artists of all kinds were searching for more individualistic ways of expressing themselves, trying to break new ground, as it were. Now, this was particularly so in the art form of dance, okay? So remember now that by the late 1800s, dance as an art form had become somewhat stale. There were few people trying to push the boundaries of inventiveness on the stage. Now, it was right around this point in time that a new free-moving, free-spirited dancer named Isadora Duncan suddenly became influential. Isadora Duncan is known nowadays as the mother of modern dance because of her important contributions to theatrical dance. And what I want to do here is take a look at some of the ways in which she was just so different from her contemporaries. Okay, so there are at least 3 ways in which she was seen as an innovator, as a new force on the stage. First, we have to consider that at the time in dancing, that is, in particular ballet dancing, it was mostly the feet and leg movements that were highlighted. In other words, dancers of the time focused their skills on highly ritualized and complicated movements of the legs. What Duncan did was to break away from this tradition, from this convention. She was, I think we can say, frustrated by the constrictions of classical dance and by what she felt was its lack of emotional impact. So she took to emphasizing the use of the whole body in dance movement. And this use of the body was inspired by natural forces, as well as folk dancing. And it included skipping, running, and jumping and twirling, a continuous flowing movement done with skillful abandon and great passion. She believed that the movement of the body could express specific emotions, emotions like anger, joy, and grief. Let me take a moment to mention that it is said that she learned these dance movements as a child by imitating natural phenomena such as the waves on the beaches near her home in California. All right, so another of her great contributions was her innovative use of costume. Now, again, the dance of the period was notable for its stiff shoes and tunics. Duncan just discarded the restrictiveness of these clothes in favor of loose-flowing gowns inspired by classical Greek models. She danced with loose hair and in bare feet, much to the astonishment of her early audiences. Again, I think we can see the influence here of nature and folk dance, things that conventional dance of the period had ignored, or I think we can even say scorned. So, okay, there was also another way we can consider Isadora as revolutionary in her practice. This is in her use of classical music as an integral part of the performance. She insisted that her art deserved to be performed to great music. For example, Beethoven, Bach, and Chopin, and other great concert music accompanied her movements on stage. And this use of music was considered daring and original at the time. Now, I think looking back, it may be kind of hard to appreciate Isadora Duncan's achievement, since so many of her contributions to modern dance are nowadays, in a sense, taken for granted. In truth, she at first had to face considerable opposition from traditionalists, as happens to many highly original artists. Her, for the time, unconventional techniques eventually, though, were widely acclaimed. Perhaps all modern dance technique owes something to Duncan's inventiveness and daring. So, perhaps because of that, her deep originality may not be as obvious to us today.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 18. What is the lecture mainly about? (19) What does the professor imply about other artists of Duncan's time? (20) Which of the following may have been an influence on Duncan's art? (21) Which of the following does the professor consider a contribution of Duncan's? (22) In the lecture, the professor describes some of the main contributions made by Isadora Duncan to modern dance. Indicate whether each of the following is a contribution made by this dancer. (23) What is the professor's attitude toward Isadora Duncan's innovations? (24) What does the professor imply about Duncan's current status? Listen to part of a lecture in an astronomy class.
So, I hope you now have an idea about the most accepted theory of how the Sun and the Solar System were formed. In fact, many new observations are showing major problems with this traditional view of planetary formation. For example, some scientists are now saying that the time frame is all wrong. The planets may have formed much more quickly than the standard theory suggests. And there are other problems too, when it comes to the formation of the outer planets, especially about how and where they formed. Some people are saying we may have to revise or even abandon the standard model. As with many theories in science, it's pretty much open to revision. But now, let's move on to an examination of what happened inside the Earth in its early stages. I know some of you have studied Earth formation in other courses, but I want to fill in the gaps for those who haven't got this background. OK, so about 4.6 million years ago, the Earth was pretty much organised into a sphere and had a temperature of around 1,000 degrees. Note also that all the material forming the planet was randomly spread around. But at that point, three things were happening which caused the planet to heat up further. So, what kind of things would cause the planet to get hotter?
All the impacts from rocks and meteorites and other stuff in space. When that stuff hits the Earth, that impact energy would be converted into heat energy. That would heat it up.
OK, good. Well, sure, that's one of the three main causes of this heating. Certainly at the upper levels, the crust of the planet. Now, what else?
The sun would have heated it?
Well, yes, but I don't just mean warming the surface. We're talking about heating the planet right down to the core, the centre. How did the Earth heat up so that iron, for example, could melt? That's at about 2,000 degrees Celsius.
What about radiation?
Yes, that's it. That is probably the most important cause of the heating up. Radioactive elements, such as uranium, within the rocks inside the planet decayed, and as they did so, heat was generated. In fact, radioactive decay is still going on, but at a slower rate than previously, since, of course, there isn't nearly as much radioactive material left due to this decay over time. OK, a third cause of the heating process was compression due to gravity. As the size of the planet grew due to impacts from space, the gravity increased, and the pressure itself contributed to the heating of the Earth's interior. So, we have three main causes of the heating up of the planet. Now, just to repeat, impacts from the objects outside the planet, radioactive decay of the elements inside, and heating due to pressure caused by gravity. So over the course of 1 billion years, all these things eventually pushed up the heat until temperatures were hot enough to melt iron and other rocks. Now, as you know, the Earth is composed of a variety of different types of materials, and so these rocks and minerals have different densities. So, that means that heavier, the denser material tends to sink over time, and lighter material tends to rise and float above the heavier stuff. That is what happens in a liquid or molten environment, of course. So iron, in particular, being heavy, sank toward the centre, and lighter rocky material rose toward the surface. At the same time, gases escaped from the molten rocks and came out at the surface, allowing an atmosphere and oceans to form. When all this sinking and rising, this reshuffling process eventually slowed down over time with the gradual cooling of the planet, what we find is a stratified Earth. In other words, a series of layers, with the crust, that is the part we live on, being the lightest, then further down the mantle, then the outer core, and finally, at the centre, the inner core. So, this process, called differentiation, led to the change in the arrangement of the interior structuring of the planet and the formation of the atmosphere and the oceans. So, while originally all material was homogeneous, randomly mixed around the planet, eventually we get a planet divided into different layers. This differentiation has been called perhaps the single most important event in the history of the Earth.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 25. What is the main topic of the lecture? (26) Why does the professor say this?
As with many theories in science, it's pretty much open to revision.
27. What does the professor imply about the formation of the Earth? 28. According to the professor, how was rock distributed before differentiation? 29. According to the professor, which is probably the main reason for the heating of the Earth? 30. What 2 points are true according to the lecture? Listen to part of a conversation between a student and an advisor at the University Learning Center.
Hi, Mrs. Douglas. I'm Jack. I made an appointment to talk to you about graduate school.
Yeah, come in, Jack. Have a seat.
Thanks. I've only just started thinking about going to grad school, and I looked at the application, what you have to do to apply here, and I found it a bit overwhelming. Writing a personal statement, asking my professors for letters of recommendation, sending transcripts. I've already taken the GRE exams.
Okay, so you're applying here?
Well, no. I just looked at the application here to see what it was like. I'm finishing up my bachelor's degree in biology, but I'd like to specialize in marine biology, and they don't offer that here.
So, have you looked around for universities that offer a doctorate in marine biology?
No. I was hoping, that's why I came to see you.
Okay, Jack. The first thing we need to do is look in our reference books on university programs to find which universities offer a degree in marine biology and make a list.
A list? Wouldn't it be kind of expensive to apply to a lot of universities?
Well, yeah, if you apply to all of them. But first you'll want to narrow your choices by finding those offering the kind of program you want. And then you'll want to consider other aspects: tuition costs, their financial aid programs, their requirements for entrance.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about all that other stuff, just about the program.
You might want to go to some of the university homepages and find the biology department pages. You could find a list of professors and their specializations. That way, you could see if there's anyone doing research in a particular area. Marine biology is a large field. I assume you have a special interest?
Yeah, the ecology of the intertidal zone.
The intertidal zone. Okay, so when you look at universities, see which ones have professors involved in intertidal zone studies, and read some of the articles they've published. Having an idea of the kind of research people are doing might give you an idea of which universities to include on your list, and who could advise you in your own research.
Hey, yeah, that's a good idea. I can look at some of the articles that I found really interesting and see what university the writer is affiliated with or where that person studied.
Perfect. When you've made your decision, then you can come back for more help if you need it.
I'll do that.
Right. Now, let's go check those reference books.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 31. What does the student need from the advisor? (32) Where will the student and the advisor look for the information the student needs on university degree programs? 33. What can be inferred about applying to graduate school? 34. Listen again to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
That way, you could see if there's anyone doing research in a particular area. Marine biology is a large field. I assume you have a special interest?
Why does the advisor say this?
I assume you have a special interest?
35. Why does the advisor suggest that the student read some of the published articles about intertidal zones?